This is probably going to be the most personal video I've made so far, because today I am talking about a video game that is extremely special to me, Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. When the original version of this game released in 2004, it absolutely blew 10-year-old me's mind. Outside of Pokemon, the original Paper Mario was my first foray into the world of RPGs, so as you can imagine, this is a very formative series for me. As much as I adored the first Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door was bigger and better in every way. A more epic story and more interesting world, funnier writing, deeper RPG mechanics. I was absolutely obsessed with this game back in 2004. I remember replaying it over and over again, especially enamored with the Glitzville and the Excess Express chapters. As a kid, I would hang out in Glitzville for hours, just walking around the floating city, talking to all the characters and pretending to be a citizen myself. This was one of the first video games I played that completely absorbed me into its world. Anyway, all this is to say that Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is easily in my all-time pantheon of video games. So as you can imagine, I was pretty excited about the Switch remake, but I was also very curious if this game was going to be as good as I remembered it. As much as I love the original, due to the difficulty of playing GameCube games these days, I haven't revisited the Land of Rogueport in close to 20 years, so I was a little nervous to see how the game had aged. Luckily though, I'm pleased to say that so far my time with the remake has been every bit as special as I was hoping for. The Thousand Year Door isn't perfect, but in my eyes it's still far and away the best Mario RPG out there and possibly the most charming video game I've ever played. The vast majority of this video is going to be me gushing about this game, so I do want to get my one criticism out of the way early. This is something that you've probably heard discussed to death, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but I do have to mention the frame rate situation. The original GameCube version of the Thousand Year Door ran at 60 frames per second, but for whatever reason, the remake only runs at 30 frames per second. I was really hoping that this wouldn't bother me, but unfortunately, in recent years, I've become a bit of a frame snob. When given the option, I always choose performance over visuals, and while 30 FPS is never a deal breaker for me, I really hope we get to the point soon where 60 FPS is the norm. Fortunately, the Thousand Year Door runs at a smooth and consistent 30 frames per second, so it's not like the frame rate is a mess or anything like that. But for me, the lower frame rate was still noticeable. I found this to be most apparent in the game's menus, as I often found myself wishing that they were just a little bit more responsive. This sounds like a minor gripe, but in a turn-based RPG like this where you're spending a lot of time in menus, it really did start to wear on me as I played. The timing on certain jump-related action commands also seems much harder than I remember, so I'm choosing to blame the 30 FPS there as well, rather than the possibility that my timing is just a lot worse than it was 20 years ago. So yeah, the frame rate situation is a bit of a bummer, but that's really the only criticism you're going to hear from me today, because even 2 decades later, I still love just about everything about the Thousand Year Door. The original game looked fantastic, but the remake takes the visuals up a level. Characters and backgrounds are more vibrant and detailed than ever, and pop in a way that they never did in the GameCube version. I'll talk more about it in a minute, but much like the original game, the setting is again the star of the show here, and that setting is made even better with the enhanced visuals. Rogueport and the surrounding areas are colorful as hell and absolutely pop off the screen. Nintendo could have taken the easy route and just did a little touch up on the game's visuals and people still would have eaten this game up because the Thousand Year Door is so beloved. However, they really went the extra mile and completely overhauled how the game looks. I'm not an expert on this stuff, so I could be completely talking out of my ass here, but it looks like this game might be running in the Origami King engine. I'm a bit of a Paper Mario purist and never played the newer games in the series because of my frustration with the direction they took them, but I was still always stunned by how good the Origami King looked when I saw videos or screenshots. To have the Thousand Year Door remade and brought into line with those visuals, man, it's a dream come true. And of course, I have to mention the game's stellar soundtrack. I usually don't talk about a video game soundtrack too much because as much as I love music, I feel like I am woefully undereducated on that front. So any commentary I have on the subject mostly boils down to some version of video games sound good, but man, video games sound good. The original Thousand Year Door had a fantastic soundtrack, and hearing some of these tunes again immediately blasted me back to my childhood. But once again, Nintendo went the extra mile here, choosing to fully remake a lot of these iconic tracks rather than just port them over. Most of the music sounds better than ever, and it's evident here just how much of a labor of love this project was. For example, the battle track is much more dynamic now, with the volume levels rising in certain situations and fading in others. And if you prefer the original game's music, then there's even a badge you can get that changes the music back to the tracks from the original title, which is an incredible touch. Again, I'm probably one of the least qualified people out there to break down the quality of a game's soundtrack, but as a longtime Thousand Year Door fan, I am very happy with how they handled things here, and it just shows how much love and care went into this game. There are a few other fantastic additions in this version as well, such as a partner wheel that allows for faster swapping, and a revamped fast travel system to help alleviate the original game's backtracking issue. And as great as all of these touches are, the thing that I've been most impressed with is what I was most impressed with when I played the original game as a kid. The charm and personality of this game are simply unmatched. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the game's setting itself. Rogueport has got to be an all-time Mario location. There is so much to love about this iconic locale, but the most obvious aspect is just how rough and grimy it is. From the noose that hangs in the middle of the town square to Mario immediately getting pickpocketed after his arrival, it's clear from the jump that this game does not take place in some generic Mushroom Kingdom location. In addition to the extremely unique vibe, Rogueport also feels like a living, breathing place. It's full of unique NPCs, with many of them having their own backstories and agendas. One of my very favorite aspects of the Thousand Year Door experience is coming back to Rogueport after each chapter and slowly unpeeling more of the area and the many hidden secrets it contains. Mario gains new equipment and abilities as his adventure progresses, which slowly opens up more and more of the central area. Rogueport is pretty big, all things considered, and you could spend hours upon hours exploring all of its corners and discovering its many secrets. I spent a countless amount of time in this town as a kid, and I plan on doing it all over again in the remake. It truly is an all-time location in the Mario series, and there's nothing like it. And that originality expands to the rest of the game as well. The first chapter of the Thousand Year Door has Mario traveling to Petal Meadows, which at first glance looks like it might be a fairly generic grassy plains Mario level. But as the chapter unfolds, you meet Koops, whose backstory quickly illustrates once again how different this game is from anything else in Mario's history. Koops is a shy, timid Koopa who is dealing with the trauma of losing his father and trying to live up to his legacy. His father went off to fight the dragon Hooktail years ago and never returned, leading the entire village to assume that he's dead. This is some pretty heavy stuff, and the Thousand Year Door is full of themes like this, containing some remarkably heavy subject matter and deep and nuanced characters. Mario's partners specifically are especially well handled. They're all oozing with charm and personality and each have their own detailed backstories, with some of them really tugging on the heartstrings. This is even more true in the remake, as Nintendo decided to restore a crucial part of Vivian's backstory in this version of the game, making her even more lovable than she was in the original title. Even the partners who don't have particularly powerful backstories are memorable in their own right. Goombella will always have a special place in my heart, due to her undying spunk and oftentimes hilarious analysis of enemies. And Madame Flurry? Well, there's certainly never been another Mario character with her design, I'll say that much. And ultimately, this is what the Thousand Year Door is all about for me, even after all of these years. The revamped visuals and soundtrack and quality of life improvements in the remake are great, don't get me wrong. But Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door remains so special today because of its glorious world and memorable characters. I truly think that the world and characters of this game are some of the greatest that we've ever seen in a Nintendo title, and all of it holds up beautifully, even 20 years later. I'm over the moon being able to replay this timeless classic, and even more excited for all the new players getting to experience it for the first time. And who knows, if this game does well, then maybe, just maybe, my 20-year-old dream of getting a direct sequel to this title might just have some life after all.